followers. I'm about to interview Steve Hickner, who is the director of Prince of Egypt. Let's see if he answers the phone.
Hello, Steve speaking.
Hey, this is Doug Kenney talking.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well.
Yeah, so how's your day going so far?
Very well. I can't complain. How about you?
It's going very good. I've been waiting for this impatiently for a week.
Oh, well, I'll try not to disappoint. You shouldn't have been waiting more than a week. It's taken a long time to get together.
Oh yeah, true, but yeah, as we got closer, I got more excited, you know?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, how can I help you? What do you want to know?
So, I have a list of questions about the production of The Prince of Egypt, and hopefully you have the answer for them.
I hope so. We'll see. I'll do my best.
Alrighty, sounds
It
good.
has been over 20 years, so
Yeah, 22, I believe, because it came out
yeah,
in 98.
I know. But we started working on it in '95, so it's actually 25 years. So for some of the things, but go ahead. Let's see
Yeah.
if I can remember.
Alrighty, so where are you originally from?
Uh, Hartford, right near Hartford, Connecticut.
Nice. Connecticut.
Connecticut, yeah.
That was one of the states that I had a hard time spelling on my spelling test in school.
I'm not surprised. Even now, it's kind of hard. I think it comes from
Yeah.
connecting the cut of the Connecticut River, the
Ah,
river that ran through there.
that makes
So,
sense.
so I think that's where the name of the state comes from.
Yeah, I'm originally from Estes Park, Colorado.
The other side of the country.
Pretty much. So, what made you decide to go into the film industry?
That is a great question. Well, I always liked to draw as a kid, and I always loved movies, and I always loved telling stories. And then in high school, I had a teacher named Mr. Myers, and he assigned us to do a report on something we liked. So I did it on comic strips and cartoonists. And when I got it back, on the report, up in the corner, it said, "See me." Well, that freaked me out because I mean, in the world of school to me, the lowest grade you could get after F was "See me." That it was so bad that you needed to talk to the teacher. So I was very nervous all during class waiting for that. So at the end of class, I went up to see him, and he said, "Have you ever thought about doing animation?" And I said, no. And he said, well, Tom Brielman, this other kid who was a year older than me, he said, he has a Super 8 movie camera, and I'll bet if you did some drawings, he would let you use the camera and you could film them. Anyway, that stayed with me for the rest of the day, and as soon as I went home, I started work on a cartoon immediately. And I didn't know what I was doing, but after about 3.5 months, I went back to him and I said, I'm finished. I'm ready. How do we do this? And he showed me how to do it, and I did it after school. And I looked at, and then I had to send it off because back then I had to go to the film laboratory. So I went to the camera store, sent it off, and I had to wait 2.5 weeks for the film to come back. And then I got it back, and I watched it, and it was terrible. But what it did do is it made me never want to do still drawings again. Once I saw the things move, that was it. That I was in love, and I wanted to work in movies.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I remember a couple occasions in school when I got told to see the teacher, and I was rather nervous about it, only to be told it was a good thing.
I know, but when you see it, it never seems like a good thing.
Yeah, you're nervous. You're like, oh my gosh, what had I done?
Exactly. This can't be good.
Yeah. So that's really cool. And I began my career as a YouTuber pretty much in high school as well when I was in a multimedia class. Yeah, I enjoy every bit of it.
And so, what do you do now?
So now I'm currently working for an organization called Country CDA. Yeah,
What is that? That's an incredible name. What is?
it's an organization based in Ghana that uses cinematic films to promote their causes. Like their causes are women's social issues and sexual harassment and sanitation and health and climate.
Ah,
Yeah.
so you mean I didn't get that when you first said. You mean the country Ghana in
Yeah, the
Africa? That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm currently part of a team that's trying to produce a film called Egby's Pub, and the team consists of some people in the Hollywood industry as well as some filmmakers in Australia and Ghana.
Hmm. Okay.
So that's currently what I'm doing right now.
All right. That sounds good.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, how did you get your job with Dreamworks Animation?
Well, I was kind of grandfathered into DreamWorks Animation because in 1987, I worked on Roger Rabbit with Disney, and that's when I met the Amblin people, Steven Spielberg's company. And when that movie ended, I went back to Disney, but I enjoyed working with the Amblin people so much, I said, I got to get with these people. So at the time, they didn't have anything, but they had talked about doing an animation studio in London. So I kept in contact with them for a year. And then a year later, I was hired as the assistant producer on for Amblimation in London on American Tail 2. And I worked there for 5 years. And then they moved the studio back with the idea that the next movie we would do would be Cats in Los Angeles. And that's when Jeffrey got fired from Disney, and he got together with David Geffen and Steven Spielberg, and they made DreamWorks. And a lot of us at Amblimation were just grandfather claused into DreamWorks, and that's how we started.
Nice. So yeah, how did you guys come up with such a brilliant masterpiece as The Prince of Egypt?
Well, we had a fantastic crew, for one. I mean, we had a background department, which I don't even know if you could put it together anymore, something that good. We had a lot of people. We had our people from London, then we had some people from Disney, and then we had some people from outside who were just beginning in the business or had done a few things in the business. And now, if you look at the industry, it's all of those people are now exceeded the visual development departments of like all the major studios.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the artwork, we had a unparalleled team of people.
Yeah. That's really incredible. No other way to put it. And the actors were spot on too, and so was the soundtrack.
Yeah, I think the music is one of Hans Zimmer's greatest achievements, which is saying a lot because his whole career is littered with fantastic movie scores.
Yeah, and the idea of making Ramesses and Moses brothers, that was really a good storyteller because it made the conflict more personal.
Exactly. It also, by focusing on that angle, it differentiated it from the other versions out there, most notably the Sesame DeMille one, which is still beloved by audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was also really, it's also kind of, the conflict between Moses and Ramesses. Like, it's really interesting that part of it mainly stemmed from Ramesses being bitter that Moses left. That was part of it.
Yes.
And then realizing that he only came back for his people and not for him. Like, that's really good storytelling. Like, I could not have come up with a more interesting storyline than that.
Yeah, it's in a story like the Prince of Egypt, because it's from the Bible. Everybody knows the story. They know how it's going to end before it. I mean, the second it begins, you already know the ending. There's no surprise there, and to make it even harder for storytellers is like halfway through the movie, Moses meets God in the burning bush, and God tells Moses exactly what's going to happen. You're going to ask for something. I'm going to harden Ramesses' heart and make him not do it. You're going to do this. I'm going to make it hard. And so, I mean, it lays it all out. So there's no surprise at all in the story. So the trick was, how do you keep that alive? And the answer for us was with the brother story.
Yep. And another thing that made the conflict so personal, if I remember right, was that Ramesses was frustrated with Moses for getting him in trouble so often.
Yeah. Yes, that Moses was the playful one because he did not have any responsibility he wasn't going to become Pharaoh.
No.
So he was freed from that.
Yeah, and Ramesses shouldered more of the responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really have to ask you about the chariot race. Like, how did you guys come up with a brilliant chariot race scene and the soundtrack for that? That was a good scene.
Well, Simon Wells boarded that. That's really his. And Simon Wells is arguably the best action storyboard artist in Hollywood. And he's a really good, he's a fantastic director too. He's a great eye. And much of that came from his storyboards. We also had some things that some of the visual development people had worked on, which we worked into the story. The score is pure Hans Zimmer. He just took it and ran. Because the score is so good in that.
Yeah, and that, combined with the other scene I really like that when it came to the burning bush, that you guys made the fire more spiritual and ghostly than, fire.
Yeah, well, that would have been the effects lead, which was Don Paul, and his team would have done that. And so, that was the first movie that we began to use computer animation in addition to hand-drawn stuff. And in those days, what a computer could do was nothing compared to what it can do now.
Yeah, like with Infinity War, that's a lot of animation they had to do.
Yep.
So, what was the idea behind Val Kilmer voicing both Moses and God? Is there something biblical related to that?
No, it's very interesting. Our original conception for the voice of God was that it was going to be made up of all the people in Moses' life. And so we recorded all the actors. We recorded Helen Mirren, Patrick Stewart, Ray Fiennes, Jeff Goldblum, Sandra Bullock, Michelle Pfeiffer, all of them saying that dialogue. And then Nick Fletcher, the editor, wove it together in an absolute tour de force of sound. It was jaw-dropping. It was so good to listen to, and it would work between the different people. Because Moses, what he was hearing was all the people in his life. Anyway, we showed that to religious groups, and it met with very strong reaction in the negative. They absolutely hated the execution of what we had done. Even though we liked it, they didn't like it because it said all those voices, what are you saying? Are you saying that God is a pantheon, that there's many gods? That's what it said to them. And of course,
Oh.
the precept of Prince of Egypt is that there's only one God. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
So once they had said that, they go, oh, although it's a cool, fabulous thing we had done, we couldn't do that. So we said the next best thing would be to make God, for Moses, his own voice. That God would speak to each person in their own voice. And then, of course, once we did that, we said, what did the other movies do? And the first thing we noticed was that the Sesame DeMille film, everybody came to the same conclusion. DeMille used Charlton Heston to be the voice of God. In Moses the Lawgiver with Burt Lancaster plays Moses, and he also plays the voice of God. And so what we thought was such an original idea turned out to be the very thing that everybody came to the same conclusion.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And so if you look at all the biblical movies, they all use whoever plays Moses, they all use it as the voice of God.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. So how did you guys select the voice actors like Ray Fiennes and Patrick Stewart and the others?
Well, what was interesting, it was never originally intended that we would get all British actors to play the royals, the Egyptians.
Oh.
It just kind of drifted that way because we all love Helen Mirren, and before you knew it, that she sounded right, and then we realized, oh, we've just hired all British actors to play the Egyptians, the royals. We had Patrick Stewart and Ray Fiennes and Helen Mirren. And then we hired American actors to do the Hebrews. So that just kind of happened.
Ah. It's very interesting what you realize afterwards when you select people.
Yeah.
But in any case, they were probably the winners of the voices just because they nailed everything.
Oh yeah, they were. Well, we had top people. I wonder today if you did the Prince of Egypt, if you would have to cast it differently. If all the Egyptians would have to be African Americans or black British, because if you'd be using say Idris Elba as Ramesses or something, if it would be that, because of course Egypt is in Africa and all the people are dark skinned.
Yeah, and it's also I know exactly what you mean because it kind of makes you wonder when you watch the movie how an Egyptian has a British accent in the movie. You know what I mean?
Well, that we're playing into, as it turned out, we were playing into. It just feels right that they're the royal. They should speak in a British accent.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But in any case, you guys did fabulous. The soundtrack was right and the actors were right. Like, it's a timeless DreamWorks masterpiece.
Yeah, it was a confluence of a lot of things went our way.
Yeah, and I've been involved in a few projects in my life where things went my way as well, and I got to tell you that's really a good feeling, and you guys should be proud.
Well, we're lucky. 20 years later, you're still interested to talk about it.
Yes, and I also think that Joseph, King of Dreams, was another good one. Like, those were probably the top two Christian cartoons, in my opinion.
I really like Joseph. In some ways, I like that story even more than Prince of Egypt because it's more personal. It's not a spectacle. It's a simpler story. It's small. The animation is nowhere near as good as Prince of Egypt, but the story still works.
Yeah, and for a number of years, when I first heard of Joseph when I had the VHS tape for Chicken Run because it had the trailer on it.
Ah.
And even though I knew about the movie for years, I didn't watch it until my early teens when I was in the middle of a rough spot in my personal life. And I was introduced to it by a cousin, and she told me it wasn't a theatrical release. And I watched the movie, and by the time that I got to the "You Know Better Than I" scene where
Yeah.
he was powerful,
Mm.
I was like, how did this movie not get put in theaters? This is brilliant.
I think it might have gone overseas in some theaters. It was funny because it was the one and only home video release that DreamWorks ever made. Because right after it came out, the video market was already starting to collapse.
Yeah. And honestly, I really think to this day that Joseph would have been just as successful, in my opinion, as Prince of Egypt if it was in theaters, because that scene, "You Know Better Than I," was very powerful. That's just my opinion.
It's a good song. John Bacchino wrote that. It's a really good song. And David, what's his name?
Campbell.
David Campbell sings it, and he's brilliant. He's perfect.
Yeah, and a couple months ago, I interviewed Danny Pelfrey, who composed the music for it, and I asked him what made him select Campbell, because at the time Campbell wasn't well known, and he told me that there has to be a level of disbelief in certain parts of the voice, but in any case, Campbell was clearly the winner, no question.
Yeah. Yeah, David Campbell was a friend of John Bacchino and actually did the temp track. And it was so good when he sang it that he got the role.
Yeah, well deserved.
Once we heard that, we could never have anybody else.
Yeah, and, it was a well-deserved role. No other way to put it. Yeah, that was very good. Like, you guys really should be proud of what you created. One movie led to another, and it's impacted so many people. You know what I mean?
Yep. Sometimes you get lucky, and I enjoyed working on both of those.
Oh, you were involved in Joseph as well?
Yeah, I was the executive producer, but I helped write it and work in storyboard and work with the directors. Yeah.
Cool, that's just great. So what was Ofra Haza like to work with?
Oh, that's such a sad story.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She speaks like 17 languages, I mean, it's some incredible amount. I think she may speak like 9, but sings in 17 or whatever it was. She sang all the international versions. She did them all.
Oh.
And that was Hans Zimmer's call to bring her in, because he had just finished Lion King, and he said that, The Circle of Life was an Elton John song, and he said it didn't feel Africa at all. And Hans said, we need something that sets this in Africa. And so he got Lebo, and that opening thing of Lebo singing, that thing, the African call,
Yeah.
that nailed the film and put it in Africa. And he said, we need the equivalent thing in Prince of Egypt. He said, we need that thing that's going to anchor this movie the minute you hear it in the Middle East. And the only way we're going to get that is to get someone from the Middle East. So Ofra Haza was a very well-known Yemenite singer, and she came in and did it in his studio and was mesmerizing. I mean, every single person who was there listening to it said, my God, she is brilliant. But she was a world-renowned talent.
Yeah. And you say that the story is sad because she passed away a couple years later. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, from AIDS.
Yeah, that's really tough. AIDS. That was a really tough time for America, and it's a shame that she didn't last. But she was a fantastic singer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she places that movie right where it needed to be right at the beginning. And she sings it. It's just heartbreaking when she sings it.
Yeah, and it just there was really her emotions behind the voice sounded extremely genuine. That's what made it great.
Yep.
So, how were you guys able to animate that epic scene where Moses parts the Red Sea in such an extreme fashion?
It's funny is that Simon Wells, one of the other directors, he used to say, and so did Brenda, says that we're writing checks that we can't cash. So we had this artwork from Paul Lassane that he had done of the Red Sea. And then we had another piece of artwork with the the whale shark going through that Ron Lucas had done. And we got to have these things in the movie, but we couldn't achieve it yet. The computer was not there to do it. So we basically had to wait till technology caught up with us. We had to keep punting it down the pipeline. Even though we were at times ready to animate it, technologically we couldn't do it yet. So we had to just keep waiting and waiting. So it came in at the very end that technology had finally caught up to where we could do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And technology advances every year, and sometimes you have to adapt to your new technological advances. You know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible. And is that partly why it took you guys a few years to make the film?
It always does.
Ah,
Because the story process in animated film is it's very difficult. It always takes about 3.5 years. Even live action films take at least 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years to put together. If you look at the the Marvel movies or whatever, it takes them 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years till the next one's ready from the same director.
yeah. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, and without taking your time on it, it may not end well as far as the reception, you know.
Yes.
You have to make sure it's as good as it can be.
Yeah, and even when Prince of Egypt came out, it was never received as big as we had hoped. It
Oh,
did okay, but it didn't set the box office on fire.
yeah, I'm surprised by that. It's really a clever retelling of Moses. And earlier this year, when I went to a prom hosted by Tim Tebow, the Night to Shine prom, I was interviewed by a journalist at my church, and when she asked me for my favorite Christian movie, I said Prince of Egypt right away, and I was like, I'm only sorry that I didn't think of it first. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. So, uh, let me think. Was there a screenplay involved, and how much of it was in the final film?
Yes, there was a screenplay that we worked from by Phil Lazebnik. He wrote it, and he would be in the story meeting, so we would talk about the scene, and then he would go write the dialogue. And sometimes some of the dialogue would come out of the story artist, and sometimes it would come from him. But he was right there with us the whole time. And then at one point, we brought in Nicholas Meyer, who did a dialogue polish on some of the stuff to make it sound more elegant and more period, because we were afraid it was becoming a little colloquial.
Yeah. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. So, how much of it did you already answer, or how much of it was in the film?
Of what, the script?
Of the script, yeah.
Well, it's from the first draft. I couldn't even begin to guess. Not from the first draft, probably very little from the first draft. But he was working right with us, so the script was going hand in hand. So the script was always evolving every day. So I would say by the end, it was 100% from the script, because
Ah.
he was one of us on the movie all the way through.
Ah. Makes sense. Got it. Yeah. So after that, I must ask, who came up with the brilliant scene of the overview of Egypt and the singers singing "Deliver Us"? It's similar to the Circle of Life, sorta, but it's that nostalgic.
Well, you mean the last shot, the wide shot where we pull back?
Yeah.
That was Derek Gogol. Derek Gogol did that drawing. I think there was I think Paul Hussein painted it, and Derek Gogol designed it.
Okay, cool. Were you amazed at how good you guys did in producing it when it was released to theaters?
Um, well, we got to see it every day, so we knew how it was coming out. We could see that it was looking beautiful. I mean, at the time, I have to say that I don't think the Disney pictures in the same era were as good as Prince of Egypt in terms of animation.
Yeah, probably not. I'm with you on that,
In terms of human animation, it was extremely well done and very difficult characters and scenes to animate.
Yeah, and the soundtrack was really good. Like, I really got a lot of feelings from the soundtrack. Like the part where Ramesses, puts the ring on his face in frustration and then stands up and puts his hat back on.
Yeah.
The music that I invoked from the soundtrack was that things were never going to be the same between him and Moses.
Yes, that's right. He's taking the mantle of the being Pharaoh, and that he is now assuming that he is a god, which is in direct contradiction to what Moses feels. Which is, you can't be God, because there's only one God, and it's not you.
Yeah, and at the same time, the pharaohs believed in Egyptian times that they were incarnations of God.
Exactly.
And what Moses was trying to tell Ramesses was that his dad was wrong on a lot of levels, which he was.
Exactly.
And Ramesses was just too stubborn, and part of that was because he was raised by his dad to be unwavering.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like anything. If you're brought up in something, sometimes you don't ask questions. You just assume that's the way it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you haven't been on the outside, you just take that as that's the truth.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting that when Ramesses is called a weak link by his dad, he seems to kind of brush it off with a little bit of upset, but not as much. But then when he roars at Moses, "I will not be the weak link," that shows how much of an impact his dad had on him.
Yes. That he can't allow that. Yeah, that line, "I am the morning and evening star," that line, that was from Nicholas Meyer.
Oh. Yeah, and I like the part when Ramesses says that to Moses, and Moses kind of shakes his head as if to say, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, the ego has completely consumed him.
Yeah, and you'd think that when Ramesses sees the tornado of fire and the parting of the Red Sea, you think he would just say, "Okay, we're out."
Yeah.
But he continued because of pride, and that's what led to his downfall.
Yeah, and the fact that, God has said, "I'm going to harden his heart. I'm going to do this."
Yep.
I'm going to do this to him. So in some ways, that's predetermined. That's going to be how he's going to react.
Yeah. Who sang the background lyrics for the plagues?
That was a group of singers put together by probably Hans Zimmer and Stephen Schwartz. That was great.
Yeah, my first memory of the plagues, when I first saw Prince of Egypt as a toddler, I actually saw it in theaters with my mom, but I was a baby at the time, and so I didn't remember it. But the minute that I first processed the plagues, like it scared the crap out of me because of what was going on. It was so epic, and I was sort of like, I'm glad I'm not in Egypt at that time.
Yeah, yeah, and an Egyptian at that time.
Yeah,
You
and
want to,
Egyptian, yeah.
you want to be on the other side of that one.
Yeah, and I definitely picked the Hebrew side for sure.
Yeah, yes.
But yeah, I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sure that was a rough time for Egypt.
Absolutely.
like raining fire and frogs and all that stuff. It's like, man. And I later read the Bible and I realized that part of the reason, from what I've studied, part of the reason that God hardened Ramesses' heart, it wasn't just to get him to eventually free the Hebrews. It was to punish the Egyptians for what they were doing to the Hebrews with slavery.
That's right. That's right.
So that was part of it. Yeah, that's so God was looking out for the people even when they're tough times, like in the Deliver Us scene.
Yes, because he could have just said, uh, after one plague, okay, go ahead, get out of here. But he didn't.
Nope, he was punishing them 10 times over.
Yes, and because they had killed the Egyptian um, firstborns, and at the end, that had to happen to them.
Yep, for sure. And just curious, the introduction scene where it shows some sand clouds that kind of break apart to reveal the statue?
At the on the opening,
On the opening, yeah, those sand cloud like things, like what were those exactly?
you know what? I have a hard time remembering. To be honest, I haven't seen the film for like 20 years. Um, it, they're, I don't know. I'm trying to remember that scene. I don't recall. They could
Yeah.
just be clouds.
Yeah, I think that that's what they are, but that was the one scene that I didn't really understand as a kid. Mainly, there was a trumpet playing in the background, like,
Yeah.
and there were like sand clouds that seemingly broke apart to reveal the statue, and I didn't understand what that was. I just focused afterwards on what was going on with the Hebrews, like those Hebrews that were pulling that enormous statue. Like,
Yeah.
as you can see, it was so big that there were like hundreds of them pulling them at once.
And on the scaffold.
Yeah, the scaffold and all that. Yeah. But that was an interesting scene as well. And I've seen fellow YouTubers, play the trumpet to that tune, and it's really interesting how the movies impacted people's music careers.
That's interesting. Well, listen, Douglas, I'm going to have to run because I'm going to have to get ready for my classes that I have to teach.
Yeah.
Is there one last thing you want to ask before I go?
Yeah, when did DreamWorks start the process for Joseph, King of Dreams?
I would say we started, I think, in spring '98, probably March, April '98.
Alrighty.
And I was working on the film. I didn't really get onto it until, say, July and August. But they were working in Encino, California, in a TV building back then.
Alrighty. So yeah,
Okay.
thank you for your time, and I'll keep in touch with you in the future. And do you think in the future we could do a follow-up maybe?
It could be. If I don't see why not. If we just have to work it into the schedule. Okay.
Alright, no problem. Thank you much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Okay, that turned out well. And now, for your entertainment, I'm going to conclude this video in special Prince of Egypt fashion.